As mentioned during our previous introduction, there is an intimate relation between Russian philosophy and classical Russian literature. And this is not just a coincidence, but an aspect of a very typical feature of Russian philosophy, namely that it in general is synthetic rather than analytical. And as such, it is not striving for an isolated narrow field of evident logical propositions, but embrace all possible kind of aspects of life, being and thinking, often being closer to poetry than to science. Accordingly, Russian philosophy, generally speaking, can be regarded as the most continental philosophy, forming the opposite extreme to analytical philosophy, which is originating from the Anglo-Saxon world. The Platonian, holistic and partly mythological world picture is also much closer to mainstream Russian philosophy than the systematic, scientific Aristotelian approach. And the very fact that Russian philosophy formed on the soil of Russian language, being to a high degree a synthetic language, that is reflected in the philosophical preconditions when comparing the two main traditions of Western philosophy. That is continental philosophy and analytical philosophy. So while modern English, being the lingual basis of not only analytical philosophy but also of computer programming, is a highly analytical language in which semantic expressions to some extension can be formed as functions of combinations of relatively isolated words coming from a language with only a few verb conjugations and only two cases and also only two grammatical numbers. Russian language, on the other hand, has a very developed verb conjugation system, not only differentized by person and grammatical number, but often also in combination with genus. Further, Russian language has preserved 6, sometimes even 7 cases, with different forms in 2 grammatical numbers, and for adjectives also multiplied by 3 for each respective genus. So that means that one single adjective, having only 3 forms in English, where they differ only by adding an s at the end for plural and genitive, a Russian adjective offers 36, 6 multiplied with 2 multiplied with 3 forms, or actually even 72, taking the short and long form distinction in considerations, which double the sum. In Slovenian and Sorbian, by the way, 2 other Slavonic languages, rather close to Russian, there are even more forms. Having 7 cases and 3 grammatical numbers, we receive 73, respectively 126 forms of adjectives for both those 2 languages. And this is not all. The words, including all kinds of names and numerals, they are also considered as names, or having a direct impact on each other. It's a little bit like chemical reactions, forming dynamic, holistic picture, where you cannot really break out any separate parts from the whole unless transforming the whole configuration. Furthermore, the deflective wholeness enables to form a complete sentence of only one single word. This is also to some extension the case of German language, a bit more in Latin and ancient Greek, and especially in Sanskrit, where you also find a general tendency to synthetic holistic wisdom, like in Russian philosophical tradition. So with other words, we do live in different worlds, reflected in and by our very own language.